Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Boost Your Profits with Disease-Resistant Varieties, sponsored by Harris Seeds. I'm Robin Sitberg with Meister Media Worldwide, publisher of American Vegetable Grower magazine. In this webinar today, we'll explore how different disease resistance packages in major crops such as pumpkins, sweet corn, squash, and beans can help increase your yields, reduce costs, and advance your profitability. Our experts will share how different varieties can be slotted to overcome various disease pressures for fresh market vegetable production. And there will be a special limited time offer at the end of the webinar. We'll have time for some questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So if at any time during the presentation you'd like to ask a question, type it in the question pane at the lower left panel of your screen and click Submit. You can do this at any time during the webinar, and we'll get to the questions at the end. So I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have 5 presenters today with us. John Moliet began his career on the family vegetable farm in northern Ohio. He's worked in agriculture management for 2 food processors and now serves as the business manager for the Eastern North U.S. and East Canada for H.M. Klaus. Our next speaker is Michael Ferlito, who launched his career in agriculture on his family's onion farm in upstate New York. He's worked in the seed industry for the past 8 years, 4 with H.M. Klaus. He now serves as their technical sales representative for New York, New England, and Canada. Mike Nowakowski is a flower and vegetable farmer based in Canandaigua, New York. He joined the Harris Seeds sales team in 2018. Mike's 10 years in roadside, farm markets, and produce auctions bring a grower's perspective that supports his 29 years in sales. Kristen Anderson comes from a multi-generational dairy farm where she developed a passion for agriculture. She studied horticulture and plant breeding at the State University of New York Cobleskill and Michigan State University prior to joining Harris Seeds. She has supported growers as the vegetable product manager for 2 years. And last but certainly not least is Dr. Wayne Wiebe, who is the Director of Quality Assurance for H.M. Klaus. He represents H.M. Klaus in the Americas and the Pacific, and he's been there since 2013. He's spent the past 38 years in the vegetable seed industry, having earned his PhD in plant pathology from UC Davis. We're happy to have Wayne join us for today's webinar, and he will be available for questions during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. So collectively, our speakers have extensive experience and a lot of information to share, so now I'm pleased to turn the program over to John Moliet.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how certain varieties can help boost your bottom line with disease resistance that have been bred into the varieties. And this is a great opportunity to increase education and to pick those varieties that will really help improve your bottom line. And we're just glad that you're taking time today to join us. And we're glad that Harris Seeds has invited us, H.M. Klaus, to be part of this webinar. Harris Seeds and H.M. Klaus have a long-standing history of collaboration that goes back several decades, and we're again very happy that they have invited us along to promote our varieties through them to use so you can be successful on your farm. Next, I'd like to give you a brief history of H.M. Klaus. And as you can see on the slide now, it all started in mid-1800s with Ferry and Company seeds, and then in 1879, the Joseph Harris Seed Company was involved to augment the business and offer more varieties, to the general farming community to have a more steady supply of good quality varieties and good quality seed to increase the markets nationwide. Then in 1963, Harris Seeds joined with Moran Seeds. 1963, Moran Seeds was formed, and then in 1984, Harris Moran was created as a merger of Harris Seeds and Moran Seeds. Then in 2009, H.M. Klaus was developed as a merger of Klaus Tessier Seeds in France and then Harris Moran Seeds in the U.S. So this was a global initiative under Limagron vegetable seeds that made a close collaboration between these two companies, HM and Close, to exchange germplasm and leading to develop of even better varieties from a global standpoint to help to increase yields and quality of the vegetables being grown in the U.S. market. So again, I'd like to welcome everyone, and I hope that you get a lot out of today's webinar. There'll be we have a lot of good speakers present with us, and to give you lots of good information on how these vegetable varieties can work for you. And we'd also like to thank Meister Media for facilitating the webinar today. Without them, it wouldn't be possible to reach as many people as we do here at one time. So next, I'll turn it over to Kristen Anderson, and she can give you some history on the Harris seed side.
Thank you, John. So as John mentioned, Harris Seeds began as the Joseph Harris Company in 1879, selling seed for vegetables, flowers, and field crops. They were a well-known breeding and catalog company that stood strong through a century of changes in the nation and agricultural industry. As John mentioned, in the 1980s, the company joined with Moran Seeds to become Harris Moran, and shortly after, the mail-order garden seed division of the business was sold to the Dickus family, keeping the Harris Seeds name. Since then, Harris Seeds has expanded to serve small to medium-sized growers and remains in strong collaboration with Harris Moran through their vegetable breeding programs. In 2019, we celebrated our 140th anniversary of supplying growers with the best vegetable and flower seed varieties, like many of those that we'll discuss with you today. Next, I'll pass it to Michael to provide an agenda for today's webinar.
Thank you, Kristen. Today we're going to take a look at a number of crops that Harris Moran is breeding for that have excellent disease packages to increase your productivity and profits. First crop that we will cover is pumpkins. We will review a number of varieties we have in our lineup that are resistant to powdery mildew. The second crop we will cover is sweet corn, and we have a nice selection of both bicolor and white sweet corns that are resistant to common rust. The third crop we do a lot of work at here at Harris Moran is summer squash, and we will review a few different virus-resistant varieties that you can try out on your farm. And finally, we will review our excellent lineup of disease-resistant green beans. And with that, I'll turn it back to Kristen.
Thanks, Michael. So before we focus on the specific varieties that we'll feature in this webinar, I'd like to talk briefly about disease resistance and how we categorize it. The most common terms you'll hear to describe varieties are susceptible, intermediate resistance, and high resistance. If a variety does not have genetic resistance to a disease, it's considered susceptible to that disease and will experience the highest amount of damage. Thankfully, there are many varieties available that offer some level of disease resistance, like those that we'll focus on today. The first level of protection is intermediate resistance, which means that the disease damage caused to the plant is reduced, but you're likely to see more severe symptoms or damage than with a highly resistant variety. So this is the first level of protection. High resistance then means that the plant can withstand damage from a pathogen for a reasonable length of time. However, under high pressure, they may exhibit some moderate symptoms. This is the top level of disease resistance. So high resistance will have greater protection than your intermediate resistance varieties will. Often you hear intermediate resistance confused with tolerance. Tolerance is a term that we most often use to describe varieties that can withstand environmental stress as opposed to disease-related stress. And lastly, it's important to note that resistance does not equal immunity. While resistant varieties offer protection against disease pests, they're never fully immune to these diseases, and some damage is always a possibility under high pressures. You'll most often see these terms listed in variety descriptions, and you can use them to understand what level of protection a variety may have against specific diseases. Disease-resistant varieties provide numerous benefits, and I'll pass it over to Mike Nowakowski to talk about that with you next.
Thank you, Kristen. Disease-resistant varieties allow plants to grow and fruit when under pressure of a pathogen. This allows the plant to reach its fullest potential. For commercial growers, disease-resistant plants produce higher quality fruit and greater yield potential. Disease-resistant varieties means less spraying, which means higher profits. Higher fruit quality and yields also converts to profitability. I recently had a commercial grower tell me 10 years ago they grew 40 acres of pumpkins. Today they grow 24. That grower grows more today on 24 acres than he did on 40 10 years ago. The grower stated without hesitation disease-resistant varieties is the reason why. Because of higher quality fruit and higher yields, this customer can increase profits while decreasing acreage. In this case, the grower saves on labor because he is more efficient picking more number one quality fruit on less acres. He is spraying less acres as well as less in general because of the disease-resistant varieties. And the grower has just freed up 16 acres of land he now can convert to other profitable vegetables. To review, disease-resistant varieties are easy to grow, they allow plants to reach its fullest potential, produce higher quality fruit, and have higher yield potential. These benefits equate to more efficient growing, less spraying, less labor, and more profitability. And with that, we'll pass it back to Mike Ferlito.
Thanks, Mike. Our first crop to discuss today are pumpkins. The main disease we focus on here at Harris Moran when breeding new pumpkin varieties is powdery mildew. Time and time again, we hear from growers who are struggling with powdery mildew, and we pride ourselves on being able to help mitigate the effect of powdery mildew on their production with our powdery mildew-resistant pumpkin varieties. Just a quick little background on powdery mildew in pumpkins. This typically shows up as a white powdery spot on the underside of the leaves. Will typically develop when the fruit starts to set. Usually prefers drier conditions, and powdery mildew can reduce both yield and the quality of the fruit. And it can also affect the handles of the pumpkins as well. Harris Moran has been a market leader in pumpkin varieties for some time now, and a lot of that is due to the work of our pumpkin breeding program started by Dr. Ted Suprak. Ted developed a majority, if not all, of varieties we will speak about today on this webinar. His work has paved the way for an excellent lineup of powdery mildew-resistant pumpkin varieties. In our lineup, we'll review and focus on three main segments: small, medium, and large size classes. Over the next 3 slides, we'll review a number of Harris Moran pumpkins, but feel free to log on to Harris Moran's website at hmklaus.com or take a look through the Harris Seeds catalog for additional HM pumpkins in our lineup that have powdery mildew protection. First, we'll start out with the small size pumpkins, and the first variety we're going to speak about is called Cannonball. It's a nice 5-pound, smooth, hard shell with a nice large handle that's perfect for painting and kids. The second powdery mildew resistant variety we talk about is Field Trip. That's a nice 5 to 7 pounds with a nice long handle that's a flat, squatty shape with deep ribs, and another one that's perfect for kids. The third one is Mischief, and that's a smaller 3 to 5 pound, very high yielding, nice small size, and very uniform. This one's used in pumpkin patches and roadside extensively for kids. And the final one in the small size class is Mystic Plus. This is about a 105-day pumpkin, about 7-8 pounds. It's a semi-vine and can be used for cooking and has a very high yield as well. We'll now move into the medium-sized pumpkins that we have to offer. The first one is a brand new one for us for this year. It's called Hermes, and this is about a 95-day, 10 to 12 pound, so it's going to be about a 50 to 60 count pumpkin with a semi-bush and a very large handle for the size of pumpkin that it is. Another one that's great for kids. The second one we'll speak about is Zeus. This is a main season variety, about 15 to 20 pounds, very uniform in shape and size. This variety also has resistance to zucchini yellow mosaic virus as well. So that's something to keep in mind if that's an issue for you. And this one's a variety that's extensively used by growers that are shipping varieties. Great for filling bins. Next, we'll move on to Gladiator. This really has been the market standard for some time and has been one of our #1 sellers for a very long time. A main season pumpkin, about 15 to 25 pounds. Very vigorous plant, great yield, and continues to be our best-selling pumpkin in our lineup. The last one in the medium-sized class I want to touch on is a very early one. It's called Orange Sunrise, and this is a precocious yellow pumpkin. So that means, basically what that means is instead of starting out green to orange, it starts out yellow to orange. So that means it's only an 85-day pumpkin. So if you're in a bad situation, getting late into the spring, this is a variety that could really help you out. It has a nice bright color, and that's typically around 15 to 18 pounds. Now I'd like to pull in Mike Nowakowski from Harris Seeds with some grower testimonials on pumpkins.
Thanks, Mike. So I've got some grower testimonials from the farmers I deal with directly that I'm selling to, and I've got a few on Zeus. John Meisenthal says, I am impressed by the strong handles even at the end of the season. Less spray, so in return, less labor and more money in my pocket. A very uniform pumpkin with good color that is a strong seller at my roadside stands. This is a strong variety I will grow for years to come. Emmy Farms said, I like the PM protection. I spray less for sure. Beautiful plants right up to the end of the season. This is a perfect pumpkin for retail and wholesale. It is nice looking with good handles. Disease-resistant varieties are the way to go. You pay a little more, but the returns are so much better. And then finally, Bob Marr Farms said, Zeus has been very dependable for us. It is consistently in the 15 to 20 pound range, making it very easy to do counted bins. Beautiful shape and color with an average size stem that holds up as a green sturdy stem throughout the season. We also are impressed with the yields and PM resistance. Zeus is definitely in our plans for this season. And we'll send it back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. We'll next move on to the large size class of pumpkins. First variety we'll talk about is Aries. This is about a 115-day variety, typically between 25 to 28 pounds. It's a nice upright shape like you can see in the picture. Some nice tapered shoulders to it with the height. It has a nice medium dark handle. The second one we'll talk about is Kratos. This variety is quickly becoming our most popular pumpkin within Harris Moran, and I think within a year or two it will be our most popular pumpkin. It's about 100-day maturity, but it's a very large pumpkin. You do get about average of 20 to 30 pounds, nice large handle, nice ribbing, and very high yielding as well. Second to last one is Rhea. This is a main season pumpkin, about 20 to 30 pounds. It's a little squattier shape than you see on Kratos. It has a nice large dark handle and well-defined ribs. And finally, to round out our discussion on pumpkins, I just want to touch on Cronus. This is our extra large variety. Again, main season. This is going to be your big one, so 30 pounds and up, all the way up to 50, 60 pounds I've seen it. Very deep ribbing, and we just like to give you a hint to give this one some room if you want it to get some size for you. With that, we'll move on to sweet corn and how common rust can affect your operation. Typically, we see that common rust in sweet corn develops under high humidity and mild temperatures. You'll notice rust-colored pustules on the leaf. Eventually, common rust can and will reduce yield and quality of the ears. Harris Moran has been focusing breeding efforts into rust-resistant varieties almost exclusively as of late. We conduct extensive variety trials across the U.S. trying to identify varieties that show resistance to common rust. We have several varieties that have shown rust resistance in both bicolor and white varieties. First, I'd like to give just a quick overview of what we call the Quality Elite Sweet Corn Program. Some of the brand attributes is that we put a large focus on developing excellent eating quality varieties. We have a full program lineup from early to full to late season varieties in yellow, bicolor, and white. We always strive for a dark green, attractive husk package with multiple flag leaves and good husk protection. We have ear shapes and sizes to meet any market demand, shipping to roadside customers. We also pride ourselves on having varieties that have great holding ability in both the field, transport, and then onto the shelf. Again, I would encourage you to visit our website, hmklaus.com, or take a look at the Harris Seeds catalog or website for other Quality Elite sweet corns that we might not mention today. So now I just wanted to run through a few varieties that we offer. The first one I want to talk about is a new one within the last year or two. It's called Flagler. We've had a lot of good feedback from this variety. It's a 76-day bicolor, around an 8-inch ear, great yield, nice robust plant with a very bright kernels on it. We've had a lot of good feedback, and this one's very quickly becoming one of our more popular varieties. The second I want to touch on is called Kate, and that's a 77-day bicolor. It's going to be just a touch smaller ear at about 7.5 to 8-inch ear. And this one really takes the cake as far as eating quality. In our lineup, this definitely has the best eating quality of all of our sweet corns. So if eating quality is number one on your list, you really got to check out Kate. The next variety I want to touch on is Coronado. And that's a new variety as well within the last couple of years. That's a 77-day white. And it's about an 8.5-inch ear, widely adaptable, really nice ear cover, and great eating quality. And the last corn I want to touch on is Natalie. And that's another one of our white corns, sweet corns. It's a 72-day white with 8 to 8.5-inch ear, very large ear. It's going to be very impressive for the roadside growers to have out there. Very big and great eating quality and also good yield. Again, I'd like to pull in Mike Nowakowski from Harris Seeds to give us a testimony on one of the corns.
Thanks, Mike. I've got Bob Marr Farms that gave me a testimonial about Flagler. Bob Marr Farms grows about 80 acres of sweet corn a year, so he's got a lot of experience here. He said, "We have grown Flagler for 2 seasons and have been very impressed with the yield, uniformity, ear appearance, and eating quality." And with that, we'll send it over to John.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Yes, and I'd just like to echo that Harris Moran has come a long ways in the development of sweet corn varieties over the past few years, and we've really got it dialed in on the eating quality and the rust tolerance, and also our sweet corns are good yielders too to help your bottom line. So next, I'd like to talk about the summer squash and also some diseases that we offer resistance to in the summer squash lineup. And the main diseases I'd like to talk about today are some of the viruses: zucchini yellow mosaic virus, watermelon mosaic virus, papaya ring spot, cucumber mosaic, and then also the powdery mildew is also affecting the summer squash too, as many of you know. And some of the varieties that we at Harris Moran offer on the green zucchini varieties that we'll talk about today are Esteem Respect, Reward, and Tribute. And then on the yellow varieties, Cougar and Lioness. So starting in with our green summer squash varieties, on this, Esteem is the first one we want to talk about. It's got a strong, healthy plant and produces high yields of darker green zucchini that are good color for the eastern markets, and also has high fruit quality with very cylindrical fruit. And this variety does have intermediate resistance to powdery mildew as well as 3 viruses: the zucchini yellows mosaic virus, the watermelon mosaic, and papaya ring spot. The next variety we'd like to talk about is Respect, and this is an earlier variety, and it has a nice open plant. While it's so vigorous, is easy to pick, and this variety produces high yields of high quality fruit. So, and this variety also is intermediate resistance to powdery mildew and intermediate resistance to the papaya ring spot, watermelon mosaic, and zucchini yellows. The next variety is Reward. This one's a little bit different. It's got a smaller plant, and this one can be used in twin row culture on plastic to increase your yields. And the plant is very easy to pick since it's a smaller plant and open. This one's not quite as dark green. This is more of a medium dark green, and this also has very high quality fruit and with a smaller blossom end scar. Then this variety, Reward, is also has intermediate resistance to powdery mildew and the zucchini and watermelon and cucumber mosaic viruses. And the last green zucchini I'd like to talk about is our newest one, Tribute. At Harris Brand, we're just getting started with this one. This will be its first year for introduction into the commercial fields, and this one is also a very high yielder, and the fruit seems to hold its shape better as it gets a little bit bigger. And this is a darker green variety with nice flecking to kind of make it a more attractive color pattern on the fruit. This one's has another one with an open plant that's easy to pick, so you can recover the yield off of it. And Tribute also has intermediate resistance to powdery mildew and intermediate resistance to 3 viruses: the papaya ring spot, watermelon mosaic, and zucchini yellows. And if you visit our website, you can see all the HM Close website. You can see all the tech sheets on all these varieties to kind of select intermediate resistance to the virus that may be affecting you. And the viruses will show up as a mottling of the fruit and misshapen and miscolored fruit. So, moving on to the yellow varieties. The first one is Cougar. This is a precocious yellow with a the yellow stem, and it is very attractive fruit, slender fruit with consistent yields with very high quality, and also is good for extended harvest to get more off the one planting of the varieties for multiple picks. And also has intermediate resistance to zucchini yellows, mosaic virus, and papaya ring spot. Then the last yellow variety we'd like to cover would be the Lioness. This is a yellow straight neck with a green stem. So it's got good levels of virus tolerance on the papaya ring spot, watermelon mosaic, and zucchini yellows mosaic. We're offering intermediate resistance to those 3 3 viruses. And this one has very good yield and very good season extension with the multiple picks, and very smooth and cylindrical fruit with just a slight bulb. But anyways, that's kind of the lineup of the squash, and we'd like to turn it back over to Mike Novakowski with some early testimonials on the summer squashes.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. So Sunscape Farms, one of my customers, was kind enough to give me a testimonial on Reward, and Sunscape says, this is a standout with the many varieties I grow, good disease resistance, little spraying, and high early season yielder with healthy plants. Good for both retail and wholesale markets. We'll definitely continue to grow this variety. And with that, we'll send it over to Mike Perlito.
Thanks, Mike. We'll now transition into green beans. Again, with disease pressures, we can see the reduced yield and profitability of your bean crop. Harris Moran has been one of the market leaders when it comes to developing disease-resistant varieties. We have a very robust bean breeding program that continues to produce disease-resistant varieties. A quick overview of some of the more major green bean diseases. In regards to bacterial diseases, we'll touch on brown spot, common blight, and halo blight. All 3 of those are bacterial diseases of beans. They typically affect the leaves and the pods, and these diseases usually favor wet weather and are spread by splashing water. Also have bean common mosaic virus, mainly spread by aphids. This will cause mottling or mosaic pattern on the leaves, and this will also affect your yield as well. We also touch on rust. These form red/brown pustules on the leaves and are often surrounded by a yellow halo. The rust can cause defoliation of the plant and will reduce the vigor and the yield of your plant. And finally, touch on curly top. This comes from a wide range of hosts. This causes puckered and wrinkled leaves that curl downward, leading to yield losses. We'll now touch on some of our disease-resistant varieties that we have to offer. Again, I would steer you towards our website, hmklaus.com, or the Harris Seed site. We have a very large program of green beans available for purchase. And if you check out our website, we have a nice comparative table so you can take a look at day maturity, pod length, and sieve size to kind of make it a little easier on you. First, we'll go into some of the green bean varieties we have to offer. The first one I wanted to talk about was Barren. This is a 54-day variety, typically a 3-4 sieve with a 5.5-inch pod. Nice, smooth, straight pods with a good yield and a very high pod placement in the plant. Second one is Bowie. This is a 56-day variety, mainly a 4-sieve variety. Again, about a 5.5-inch pod, a little bit of a darker color, nice dark green, and very easy to harvest. The third variety I wanted to touch on is Crockett. This is a later one, about 58 days, and it's a little smaller, about 2 to 3 sieve with about a 5-inch pod. And this one really is one of at the top of the heap when it comes to disease resistance in beans. The next one is LaSalle. This is a newer variety from us from the last 2 years, and this is gaining a lot of interest, and a lot of growers are getting on board with this variety. It's about a 54 days, about a 5.5-inch pod. It's a darker color with very high yields. We've done countless yield trials throughout the U.S., and for my part in the Northeast, this is always at the top of the heap when it comes to yield. What LaSalle also brings to the table is a very nice heat set. Now I'd like to pull Mike Novakowski from Harris Seeds back in to give some grower testimonials.
Great, thanks, Mike. I've got two varieties in the beans I'm going to give testimonials on. The first one is Barren, and it comes from Sunscape Farms. Very healthy plant that stands high, which makes it great for machine or hand picking. I started with this variety in trials before it was offered commercially, and will continue to grow this variety. The bean itself is a nice dark green and is a good seller at my market. The disease package is great on this one. I did not have to spray this season at all. And then the second variety is LaSalle, and that comes from Emmy Farms. I for sure spray less, and that makes a huge difference. It saves money and is environmentally friendly. We are not an organic farm, but try to use organic practices, and the disease-resistant varieties is a huge help in that. This is a nice high plant with strong yields I will continue to grow. The only downside is the deer still love them. And with that, we'll turn it back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And then finally, we will round out the green bean section with one of our varieties called Pike. This is about a 55-day variety with about a 5-inch pod, and this is primarily a 3-sieve variety, and this is going to have more of a medium to dark green color on the bean. And again, this is one that's a very easy harvest. With that, that wraps up our green bean varieties, and I will now turn it over to Kristen and Robin for the questions.
Thank you, Michael. So as Michael said, that concludes the variety portion of our webinar. I'd like to extend thanks to Michael, John, and Mike for sharing their experience with these varieties, and a thank you to all of you for attending this webinar. Next, we'll have a brief question and answer session, followed by details on a special offer for today's attendees. If after the close of the webinar you have additional questions about any of these varieties, please contact your Harris Seed sales representative. And for further information about disease management practices, please contact your state's extension office for the most appropriate information for your area. Thank you again for joining us today. I will now turn it over to Robin for the question and answer session.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Since you're right there and available, I'm going to start with you. We've gotten a lot of questions in so far. And the first question is Kate available this season?
Thank you, Robin. Yes, so we have had some crop issues with sweet corn Kate, and unfortunately it is a short crop this year. So we as Harris Seeds are no longer accepting any additional orders for Kate, as we have already sold out of the inventory that we will receive. If you've already placed an order with us for sweet corn Kate, we're in the process of our prorate, and you will receive additional information from us shortly. But unfortunately this year we are sold out, and we hope that you'll look for it again next season. It is an excellent variety.
Okay, thank you. And the next question I'm going to throw to Michael. And that's, what sugar genetics are Flagler and Kate? Are they SH2, SE, or something else?
Good question, Robin. Sorry, I glossed right over that, but all of our new genetics and all the corns that are within the Quality Elite program are SH2s. So
okay,
you have to make sure you do segregate them from your other corns that you might be growing. So thank you.
All right. I'm going to ask Wayne to join in here. One question is, does disease resistance mean GMO? That's probably a common misconception.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Robin. So first of all, a GMO is genetically modified organism. And what happens, yes, that process can give you a resistant variety. What happens is researchers will look for a gene or piece of DNA that has the desired trait, typically in a non-related species, and then go through the process of inserting those into the genes of the varieties of interest. However, by far and away, the most common way of developing disease resistance is to find a closely related variety or a particular plant of a variety that has the trait that you're looking for, and do normal breeding, back-crossing, typical breeding processes to get that into the new variety. So Very uncommon for GMO, but possible. But the normal way is just through typical standard backcross and breeding to get that trait.
Okay, good. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, I'm going to throw the next one back to Kristen, which is, where can I find a full listing of all pumpkins with PMP protection?
Thank you, Robin. That's a good question. So we have several different resources that our growers can use to get more information on our powdery mildew protected pumpkins. The easiest, depending on the resources you like to use, would be our website. If you go to harrisseeds.com and go to our pumpkin section, there is a separate web page with all of the powdery mildew protected pumpkins. So you can view them all collected in one place there. You can also see them in our catalog with a specific icon on each image for powdery mildew protection, so you can look at them that way if that's your preferred way to research varieties. And you can also go to the HM Klaus website and find their pumpkin guide that they put together each year, which has additional information on all of their pumpkin varieties, as well as different production recommendations for those. So there's several different places you can go. If you have further questions, you can always call our office and we can help you from there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question is about beans, and this is for Michael. Are Harris Moran beans best for hand or mechanical harvest?
Yeah, Robin, that's a good question. So most all the varieties we talked about today on the webinar are able to be mechanically harvested. So they're all dual-purpose varieties is what we'd call them. So they're good to go on hand harvesting or mechanically harvesting them.
Okay. All right, John, this next question is for you. It's, what are the causes of misshaped fruits in squash? They do get to be some strange shapes sometimes.
Yes, I've seen that myself, and yeah, thanks for the question. And there's several different things that could be going on in the squash to be misshapen. And I guess the one could be poor pollination. You want to make sure you have a lot of bee traffic within the squash field for proper pollination. And then the another cause can be either too much or too little water. So water stress could make those misshapen sometimes. And then one of the other leading causes would be the plants being attacked by virus. So that can lead to more bumpy, odd-looking fruits with raised areas and so forth. And then the other sign of virus would be crumpled leaves, especially on the new growth and twisted growth. So again, choosing a resistant variety would help that. So that's the main causes that I could identify right now. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's helpful. Kristen, this question says, person says, not the question, I'm new to growing SH2 corn. What should I consider if switching from a synergistic?
Sure. Thank you, Robin. So SH2 is also called super sweet corn. So it's a different genetic class, like Mike kind of touched on earlier with that question that we received. And there are a few different things that you need to consider with growing super sweets. One of the biggest ones is isolation. So super sweets have different genes for different sugar concentrations and texture of the kernel and things of that nature. And if they are cross-pollinated by another genetic class, kind of like a synergistic or something of that genetic class, it can affect the quality of the sweet corn that you will get out of a super sweet. The same goes with different isolation from field corn, popcorn, ornamental corn. So any cross-pollination can cause an issue with some of the eating quality on a super sweet. So the biggest thing that I'll mention in terms of something to consider is isolation. We have some resources available on our website and our catalog to help you with that if it's something that you would like some more information about. There's a few different ways to do that, is to separate your plantings by maturity days, so give about 10 to 14 days maturity day in between. or plant with a windbreak in between the two varieties, or at least 250 feet. So that's one of the things to consider. And another thing to be mindful of is that sometimes we've had misconceptions that super sweets are very sensitive to cold soil, and that was true for some of the the older first introductions of super sweets, where you had to be very considerate about cold soil. You still need to be very mindful of that, but you also, there are some varieties that are newer that perform much better in cold soil. So if that's something that is prohibiting you from trying super sweets, you can always call and talk to one of our sales members, and they can help guide you in that way.
All right. Michael, this next one's about pumpkins for you, and it's two questions. You can probably answer them as one. What is the most popular pumpkin you offer that has PMP protection, and also what is the earliest day pumpkin that you have with PMP protection? So popular and earliest.
Yep, so we touched on a few of those during the presentation actually today. So currently our most popular pumpkin with powdery mildew protection is probably Gladiator. That's really been the market standard for some time now, and a lot of growers have had a lot of good luck with that. Slowly but surely, some of the new varieties like Zeus and Kratos are starting to creep up and eat away at some of the market share that Gladiator has. And as far as our earliest varieties, that would definitely be Orange Sunrise. Again, just impressive how early that is. Just to give you an example, I'm located in upstate New York, and we had pumpkins coming off one of our growers' farm of Orange Sunrise in the end of August. They're ready to go. So definitely our earliest variety by far.
Okay. Wayne, can you explain how to differentiate phenotypically between viruses and pumpkins?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think it was mentioned earlier today that sometimes, these viruses, they give symptoms that look very similar. It's sort of a rare situation that you get something distinct enough you can look at it and you say, this is CMV or something like that. The bumpiness, the leaves, the strapping, the mosaic of them can be very common among a range of viruses. So if you have a virus, your best bet is to find a diagnostic lab, and there are several of them commercially available that you can take a sample and send it to and get a diagnosis, because it's very important, because they're transmitted some by aphids, some by whiteflies, and it will help you in your control to know what virus it is and how it's being transmitted. So I would highly recommend that you send it to one of these labs to have a diagnosis.
Okay, thank you. John, do you have any novel pumpkins, like the ones with warts that have PMP protection? That's what one of our listeners is asking.
Okay, thanks, Robin. And yeah, that's a good question for the times, because the market has several, great jack-o'-lantern and small, varieties of pumpkins on it now. And the novelty class seems to be where the everything new is. So we do have the warty gnome and the warty goblin pumpkins that are heavily warded, and then also the mini warts. So mini warts in the warty goblin have a orange background with chartreuse or light green to dark green warts, and with a hard shell background. And the warty gnome also, they all have intermediate resistance to powdery mildew.
Okay. We'll keep you on here with another question about zucchinis. With so many green zucchinis to choose from, what are the main differences?
In the zucchini world, it's basically specific markets have like specific shades of green, and so you can kind of research your market a little bit and see what shade of green they like, from light green to medium green, medium dark green to very dark green zucchinis for some specialty markets. So that would be the first thing to investigate. And then the second thing would be what culture you're going to raise them on, raised beds, plastic drip irrigation, or if you're just going to raise them on bare ground. So in that case, you'd want for just a bare ground culture, you'd want a little bit more vigorous plant that can withstand the ups and downs of the weather and still give you a good yield. And then for the raised bed, drip on plastic where you're going to, spoon feed it and be a little bit more intense on the management. You can get away with a little bit smaller plant that could be easier to pick when still giving you the good yields. And then also the yields, you can test different varieties over the years to see what can bring you the best yield for the most profitability.
Okay. All right, Michael, back to you with pumpkins. Which variety, Kratos, is it Kratos, or Zeus has the highest yield? I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Yeah, Kratos. Yeah.
Kratos, thank you.
Both are very comparable as far as yield. I'd say, in my experience, Kratos might edge it out just a touch. We kind of have an open running joke around here that if you drive past a field of orange, it's likely Kratos. So it's just amazing some of the yields you get out of that. So not by much, but Kratos is, in my opinion, just a touch better on the yield.
Okay. We're going to need to, this will probably be our final question, and then Mike Nowakowski is going to go over the special offer. But I first want to ask Wayne, just to kind of sum up the importance of developing resistance to disease, is how much, in a guesstimate, what percentage of yield losses occur due to viruses or powdery mildew?
Okay, so I'm going to give, that's sort of a complicated answer, of course. And this is one of the reasons why you want to have resistant varieties if you can, if you've got specific viruses or mildew in your area. Because to a great extent, it depends on the variety itself, and then when is the infection occurring in the life cycle? Is it occurring early in the season? If so, then you've got a much higher risk of it getting worse as the season goes on, or is it occurring later in the season? And then for viruses, what is there out there spreading it? Do you have a high population of aphids? Do you have a high population of whiteflies that are moving it around? So if you've got those, the vectors, and you've got persistent conditions for the powdery mildew, the yields can be loss can be pretty high. You could lose 25, 30, 40% or more if you've got persistent conditions for these diseases to exist, and especially if they start early in your production cycle.
Okay. All right. Mike, I guess I'm going to throw it back to you and let you tell our listeners about the special offer at the end of this webinar here.
Great, thank you. So today we have an exclusive offer for today's attendees from February 6th through February 21st, 2020. Receive 5% off of the Harris Moran varieties that we mentioned in the webinar today. All the pumpkins, sweet corn, squash, and beans listed in the presentation are eligible for this special offer. The offer does exclude sweet corn Kate due to its limited supply. To receive this limited time offer, mention source code WEBINAR, WEBINAR, when placing your order by phone at 1-800-544-7938. This promotion cannot be applied to existing orders or used online. Additional promo codes may not be used, and standard Harris seed volume discounts and terms may be applied. And with that, we will end today's presentation, and thank you for all that attended.
Yeah, and I'd like to go further and thank you, our speakers, and Harris Seeds for sponsoring the webinar. And I want to remind our listeners that if you want to refer back to this webinar at any time, in just a few hours after it processes, it will be available as a recorded version at the same link you used to register and watch it today. So you can also find the link at growingproduce.com/webinars. So thank you again for joining us today.